Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and today we're taking a look at the all-new 2014 Fiat 500L. This is Fiat's second entry into the American market since coming back with their much smaller Fiat 500. I'll apologize in advance, I'm fighting a sinus infection, so if I sound a little nasally or cough a little bit in this video, let me apologize for that right up front, but let's walk around, let's take a look. So what is the 500L? Well, let's get one thing out of the way right away. This is not a stretched Fiat 500. In fact, this is much more closely related to the Fiat Multipla or the Grand Punto, two vehicles that are very strangely named to the American ear and are sold only in Europe. That means it's 27 inches longer than a Fiat 500, it's about 6 inches wider and about 6 inches taller as well. This thing is quite large compared to that Fiat 500. It's not a terribly large vehicle for the American market. As you can see, I'm about 6 feet tall, and you can see me in relation to this vehicle. We do have a very large rear door, which is one of the hallmark styling features of the Fiat 500. There are a number of odd things going on here to the American eye as well. We have the A pillar right here, and the B pillar, I suppose you'd call it that, right here, because there's this fairly large interesting first window. So there are 10 pieces of glass in this car. It's an awful lot of glass going on here. Glass wraps all the way around the back, another window back here, and then of course we get the rear window here as well. Our model has the optional panoramic sunroof, which means the roof of this Fiat 500L is all glass as well. Overall, the styling kind of apes the Fiat 500 just a little bit, but the proportions seem off to my eye. Beauty is definitely in the eye of the beholder, so let me get one thing out of the way right up front. I'm not that keen on the styling on the Fiat 500L, and it's just the L version, because I think that the small, regular-sized Fiat 500 is incredibly attractive, but for me something just goes a little bit wrong when Fiat translates it to this much larger vehicle. And I think the problem for me is that the proportions seem a little bit off versus that cute small Fiat 500. We still have the same headlamp arrangement going on here with the main beam and high beams up here, the fog lamps down below. We still have the Fiat badge nice and prominent on the front with these large chrome sort of wing things going on here. The Pop, the Easy, and the Lounge models of the Fiat 500L get this front arrangement, while the Trekking model gets a slightly different front bumper to be a little bit more stylish. I'd love to hear what you think about the Fiat 500L styling, so go ahead and comment in the comment section down below. I have met a few people this week who really liked the way that Fiat 500L looked, but on the whole, a lot of people scratched their head when they looked at it. A lot of that head scratching comes from these small windows right here on the vehicle. It's an interesting style choice, but it's one that looks a little bit peculiar to the American eye because I haven't seen this in a very long time. It reminds me an awful lot of 1950s cars where they had sort of a bubble windshield and the windshield wrapped all the way around from this portion of the car all the way around with one continuous piece of glass around the front. I almost think that would have been a better style choice for Fiat to have had a wraparound windshield like that, although it does result in some strange optical distortions. We'll take a look at this more on the inside. The small front window is mostly an interesting style choice for Fiat because it doesn't really impact front visibility that much. This pillar is fairly narrow, as you can see right here. It mostly makes the interior of the 500 airier than it would be otherwise, and it allows this dashboard and front windscreen to be slightly larger and positioned further forward in the vehicle than it would otherwise because you have that small window there, so you don't have to have the dashboard and the sides wrap all the way around to that front door. The back of the 500L is somewhat plain, and we lose that steeply raked rear hatch that you find in the regular Fiat 500. Interesting style choice, they put the backup camera right here in the middle of this 0 in the Fiat 500 logo, and you'll find the hatch release for that large rear hatch right there just above the license plate. Now the hatch does open to reveal a very large cargo area, which is quite nice. This hatch is fairly upright, which means that storing cargo in the Fiat 500L is quite efficient as well. We have a single chrome exhaust tip down here. There's only one engine option in the Fiat 500, so let's go take a look at that. Under the hood of the Fiat 500L, you'll find a version of the same 1.4-liter multi-air turbo that you'll find under the hood of the regular Fiat 500 Abarth trim, as well as that new Dodge Dart. In this vehicle, it produces 160 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. The Fiat 500L is front-wheel drive only. Based on the floor stamping in this vehicle, we don't expect an all-wheel drive model at any time. Power is sent to these front wheels only via a standard 6-speed manual transmission, which is relatively similar to the one that you'll find in the Fiat 500 Abarth, as well as a 6-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission. Now that dual-clutch transmission is really just two manual transmissions jammed together in the same casing, and the computer controls the shift and the clutch. Thanks to that manual-based transmission, fuel economy is fairly high in the Fiat 500L, scoring 25 in the city, 33 on the highway, and a 27 mile per gallon combined rating by the EPA. All models of the Fiat 500L come with a tilt telescoping steering wheel, which is a handy feature in a vehicle like this. And that's because this front seat has a decent range of motion regardless of which Fiat 500 model you get. Now the seat is always manual regardless of which trim level of 500L that you do opt for, but you do have a decent range of motion. You can really move this seat quite high up for a manually adjustable seat. The passenger seat on the Fiat 500 is optionally adjustable for height as well, so it is an option not on the base pop model, but on the upper level trims of the Fiat 500 you do get that option. We do have a decently high ceiling, even though this model has the optional sunroof, which makes it a lot easier for taller drivers to get in this car and feel comfortable. They'll also feel comfortable with these large and very wide seat bottom cushions and seat back cushions. The bolstering is not terribly severe, so it's a lot easier for larger passengers and larger drivers to get comfortable. In an interesting twist, we have an electrically adjustable lumbar support in this seat, not available in that base Fiat 500L again, but it is standard in the upper trim levels. Let's take a look around the interior now. Again, we're in the lounge model, and our model has these partial leather seats. So this portion of the seat is vinyl, and then the seating portions of the seat are leather. So we get this perforated leather here on the driver and front passenger seat. If we move over to the doors, you'll find an upgrade over the very base model of Fiat 500, and that is the soft vinyl insert in the door. We get that same soft vinyl treatment over here on the dashboard as well. We have a split glove box arrangement with a small glove box here and a second small one below it. Air vents that open and close in the dashboard. Our model has the 6.5-inch color touchscreen. Base models get a 5-inch color touchscreen. Down here we'll have menu controls, we'll go over those in a little bit. Fog lamps, door lock button over here on the dashboard. Dual zone climate control is an option in the Fiat 500L. And then down here we have the inputs for that Uconnect audio system. Continuing down, we have two fairly large cup holders, which is a nice improvement for the American market. You can easily fit large sodas in there from drive-thrus. We have our shifter for the 6-speed automatic transmission. It has a manual mode there. Down here you'll find your stability control off button, a very strangely positioned and very strangely shaped parking brake. So if I move the camera here and I can get my hand in that position, it's very odd to use actually. It's not the most ergonomic handle I've ever seen. It is very stylized, very stylish for the Fiat 500. We get a single, fairly small center armrest as well. Fairly small cubby on the inside. You can barely fit a wallet and a few other items in there. Everything is definitely very European sized in this car. From that center armrest to this interesting placed air vent right here in the dashboard, and that's above the radio. As you can see, this helps direct air to the rear passengers since there are no air vents in the rear of the car. Moving over to the steering wheel, we have our cruise control buttons on this side of the steering wheel and our phone buttons and voice command buttons on this side of the steering wheel. In Chrysler fashion, these are borrowed from the Chrysler lineup. We have buttons on the back of the steering wheel for volume up and down and source selection, as well as track up and down on this other side of the steering wheel. The instrument cluster is straight out of Fiat. See, we have a 4-dial arrangement here: speedometer, tachometer, fuel gauge, and temperature gauge. This multi-information display in the middle is very typical in the Fiat lineup in Europe, and it's just been transplanted for the American model. Our Fiat 500L has the optional panoramic sunroof. One thing to keep in mind is this panoramic sunroof does not have a completely opaque cover to it. So most vehicles with a sunroof, this is a piece of fabric that does not let any light through. The Fiat 500Ls, as well as the Fiat 500's sunroof covers, allow an awful lot of light in. It makes the cabin feel airy, but personally it gives me a bit of a headache, and it makes the cabin a little bit too hot for me in hot sun. So it is something to keep in mind if you live in a hotter climate. Getting in and out of the Fiat 500 is fairly easy thanks to those large door openings. Once you're inside, you'll find seat bottom cushions that are a lot further from the floor than you'll find in something like a Kia Soul or a Mini Countryman. That does cut down on headroom, however. Because I'm sitting a little bit higher off the ground and the overall vehicle is about the same height, my head is touching the ceiling. Again, we are in the model with the optional sunroof, so if you don't opt for that sunroof, you do get a bit more rear headroom. I'm only 6 feet tall, and I couldn't sit upright in this back seat. I do have a decent amount of legroom, however. This front seat's adjusted for me, and I have about 4 or 5 inches of legroom left there. The middle seat in the Fiat 500L is just about as comfortable as these outboard seats as well. The seat cushion is a little bit firmer, so it's a little bit less comfortable there, but I don't have much of a hump here, so still have a decent amount of legroom left. Headroom is actually a little bit better in this middle seat just because of how this sunroof is positioned. If I scoot over all the way to this side, this front seat was adjusted for a 6'5" passenger in the car. As you can see, I still have several inches of legroom left behind that seat. These rear seats do recline in a two-stage recline mechanism. So this is the most upright position, and this seat that I'm in right here is the most reclined position. There's no intermediary position in these Fiat 500L seats. One thing you won't find a whole lot of are cup holders in the Fiat 500L. Out back, we only have this one cup holder in this fairly small center armrest. We were able to put the largest size takeout cup you can get in a drive-thru in America in this cup holder. It fit fairly well, but it'll only fit one. Now there are these bottle holders in the doors as well, one on each side of the Fiat 500L, but the manual tells you not to put a traditional style takeout drink, the one with the snap-on plastic lid, in these door pockets. They're strictly for bottles with sealed lids only. Making cargo carrying easier, these rear seats do move forward and backward almost 5 inches. They also tilt forward as well as tumble forward to increase that rear storage area. Now you still have portions of the seat in the way, and these seats don't come completely out, but it is an awful lot handier to have them in that position than in this position because that cargo area is quite low. So let's go back there and take a look at that now. We were able to fit a surprising amount of cargo in the Fiat 500L. This is the largest roller bag you can carry on a domestic flight. So you can see you can fit several of them fairly easily in this cargo area. You can fit almost 3 of them side by side in this position in this cargo area, but there is a little bit of a trick to this cargo area, and that is that it has this divider that you can either remove or reposition at the bottom of this load floor. You can fit smaller items under it like that, and then you can put this divider back in right there, nestled on the bottom of the load floor, and then you can put these larger roller bags in this upright position, so you can fit more of them in the back fairly easily. Some additional cargo can go on top of them as well, and there is also a standard cargo tonneau cover over the top to keep your belongings out of view. Since we have the optional Beats audio system, we have a subwoofer back here that takes up a little bit of cargo room. Overall, the trunk comfort score in the Fiat 500L is a solid 8 out of 10 points for cars this size. Decent amount of trunk space back here, and the cargo hatch has a very nice handle, making it a lot easier to close that cargo area when you want to. Let's take a closer look at the infotainment system now. If you're not interested in that, then go ahead and follow those instructions at the bottom of your screen to skip forward to the drive section of the review. Our particular model has the optional 6.5-inch Uconnect system. Because of Fiat and Chrysler's tie-up, all Fiat models in the US will now be receiving the same Uconnect system as the Dodge, Ram, Chrysler, and Jeep vehicles. This is the smaller version of the same system that's been winning a number of awards in the Chrysler 300 and the Jeep Grand Cherokee. Now, base pop models get a 5-inch version of this system that does not have navigation, and other models in America for 2014 will come standard with this 6.5-inch screen. We're told that the 2015 model year, Fiat may change that, and they may cause it to be a $1,700 option, but we're also being told that for 2014 that all models will get the same system. It's very similar to the 8-inch Uconnect 2 system that we've recently reviewed in the Jeep Grand Cherokee and Chrysler 300, except that instead of having these buttons for radio, media, nav, etc., part of the screen interface, we have direct access buttons on the bottom, which means we don't really lose too much screen real estate when you compare it to those other systems. Down here we have the direct access buttons to radio. Up across the top we have our presets, multiple pages of preset buttons as you can see across there. You switch between AM, FM, and Sirius XM with those buttons there on the screen. We also have direct access tuning, which I really like because a number of systems that are in this space you have to tune using the knob. You can't just type in the number you want, and this really is much more efficient to enter your information that way. We also have access to traffic and weather by Sirius XM. Over here on the media tab, you'll find your typical Chrysler iPod interface. The system provides one USB port, an SD card slot, and an auxiliary input. One thing you will not find on the Fiat 500L, and not available at any price, is a CD player. There's just no place for a CD to go in this dash because digital media has really taken over. Much like the other Uconnect products, the iPod interface is very nicely featured. It also is fairly quick in response. Full access to your complete iDevice, USB stick, etc. Full access to playlists, songs, albums, etc. New for this year, there are also full voice commands in this system a la Microsoft Sync with the Ford product line and Lincoln product line, so you can just hit the button and tell it to play the artist or the track that you're looking for. Over here on the nav interface, we have the same Garmin interface that the larger system uses. So we click on this button, you'll see that now we have the Garmin map. Because this system puts the direct access buttons on the bottom, I find this system to be just a little bit better integrated than the 8-inch system in terms of the way the nav looks on the screen. The system is fairly snappy, especially when you compare it to something like Mazda's new system. We do have full voice commands of the nav interface on the system, although they are not designed the same way as most other nav products. So most nav products in this space, you'd hit the command button and you'd say navigation destination or something along those lines to take you to a new destination. Here you'd say navigation and then where to, or navigation view map. So it's exactly what you see on this screen here as far as entering a navigation address. The address entry in the system is very speedy. You can see here we'll enter an address. It's not quite as fast as some of the other products in this segment, but overall this ranks somewhere in the middle. Definitely faster than my Ford Touch. If we go over here to the phone interface, you'll find again the same phone interface that you've seen in other systems. Optional text messaging if your phone supports it. It's not supported by iOS devices at this time. One thing to note is the system does provide enough power to power certain high draw devices like modern tablets, Android tablets, iPods, iPads, etc. that require just a little bit more USB power than those original devices would. The More tab basically displays a home screen, so you can see what your media is doing on the top, what the outside temperature is, what your navigation is doing. By clicking on one of these quadrants, it'll take you to that particular section inside Uconnect so you can interact with it. If you want your settings, they're over here on this little gear icon. You really can't change any vehicle settings in the Fiat 500L via this display. If you want to change vehicle settings, that's down here in this menu button, and you have to use that display in the center of the instrument cluster to change things like the dimmer, speed buzzer, a few other vehicle settings like that are changed via this menu button here. There are a few certain systems that are changed in this screen, like how the door locks behave on the car, the clock, certain safety and driving assistance systems. In this car we only have the park view backup camera and its delay. But overall, it is still a little bit odd, just like the regular Fiat 500, in that there is this second menu to interact with. The Uconnect 5 system in that base pop model operates very similarly, except of course for the smaller screen, slightly different knob placement, and the lack of the nav option. Compared to the 8-inch screen, this system is a little bit more sluggish. I'm not exactly clear why. Chrysler tells us there isn't a whole lot different in terms of hardware other than the screen size, but we did notice that changing screens in the system is a little bit more sluggish than our last experience with Chrysler's Uconnect. The system overall ranks higher than my Ford Touch in terms of responsiveness, just about the same in terms of voice command, slightly lower in terms of that navigation interface because the maps aren't quite as nice. We don't have access to smartphone integration in this system yet. We do expect that at some point in time, just not in the 2014 model year. Also, 2015, the system will no longer be standard across the product line. Fiat is just calling this a gift for the launch of the 2014 Fiat 500L. I hope that they change their mind on that because this really does bring the Fiat 500L up quite a bit in this market segment. The Nissan Cube and the Kia Soul do not include nice touchscreen radios by default, and Mini's iDrive connected system is a very useful system, but I don't like its interface quite as much as this. I do like iDrive in general, but BMW's version that they put in the Mini product line is sort of a hobbled, clipped down version of the regular BMW iDrive system. So overall, this scores top marks for me. Fiat's dual clutch transmission may take a little bit of getting used to if you're used to driving a regular automatic transmission. That's because this transmission shifts a great deal. With a 1.4-liter turbocharged engine under the hood, this car is very eager to upshift to improve fuel economy, but it's also quite eager to downshift when you need a little bit more power. Sometimes it downshifts a little bit too eagerly, if I'm honest, because the torque curve on this turbocharged engine really isn't all that bad. It's fairly broad from about 2,000 RPM to right around 5,000 RPM or so, and so some of the downshifts that this car performs really aren't necessary, but at least it's not sluggish in that respect. So you never feel like the car isn't doing what you want it to do. It's never really feeling like it's taking its dear time accelerating either. In terms of actual performance numbers, we scored 0 to 60 in 8.34 seconds, which is fairly respectable for a car of this size. Definitely better than I had expected when you think about a car with a small 1.4-liter turbo under the hood. I'd call these performance numbers relatively similar to something like that Buick Encore, which in a way sort of competes with the Fiat 500L. Not quite the same vehicle, but again, there really isn't anything quite like this Fiat 500L out there. There are two other situations where dual clutch transmissions, and that's pretty much anybody's, not just Fiat's, feel a little bit unusual. The first is in low speed driving. If you're driving slowly along a gravel road because you don't want to get your car dusty, or maybe you're just going down a driveway slowly, something like that, then the car is slipping the clutch in order to do that. So if you're going up an incline slowly, then that can result in some very jerky stop and go motions, or you can just end up with a little bit of increased clutch wear. You can get a little whiff of clutch smell in the Fiat 500 because it uses dry clutches. That's not something that you get in Volkswagen's DSGs, which primarily use wet clutches, but overall that's not really a major problem. The second thing that you get with dual clutch transmissions is you get a little bit of rolling forward or rolling backward if you're on very slight slopes. If you're on a more aggressive slope, then this car does have hill hold assist, and so it will maintain brake pressure to keep you from rolling forwards or rolling backwards in those situations. But otherwise, it is a manual transmission, so there's no torque converter there. So if you're on a slight up incline and you just release your foot from the brake, you're going to roll backwards just a little bit like you would in a manual transmission. Again, it's something that you'll get used to, and it's something that happens in all of these dual clutch transmissions. It's not just a Fiat thing. Fiat tuned the springs and dampers in the 500L on the firm side of the spectrum, and they gave the 500L fairly stiff anti-roll bars as well. That really means that out on these roads we get very little body roll, even though you can tell that grip isn't as high as it would be in something like a Mini Countryman or one of the mini wagons, something along those lines. It is fairly high and very confident feeling. The suspension doesn't get upset very easily over rough pavement like the Kia Soul does. Kia Soul has just a little bit of a problem there on uneven pavement. Definitely handles better than something like a Nissan Cube as well. Overall, I would rank this about the same as a Buick Encore, which is high praise because I really liked that Buick Encore the last time we had it. The Encore has a nicer interior, but I think that the Fiat has a slightly better feel out on the road. It's definitely a little bit more power going on in this Fiat engine, and thanks to that dual clutch transmission, it really is able to apply that power better than the Buick Encore as well. The engine and chassis go so well together that I wish Fiat had included shift paddles on the steering wheel. Part of that is just the positioning of this shifter in the center console. Because this center armrest is in the position that it's in, you have to lift it out of the way in order to really use that shifter for shifting the car manually. And it's one of these forward-backward rather than side-to-side shifters, which I just don't find quite as easy to use. I really would prefer shift paddles because this transmission is very quick shifting and it's very responsive. It has a nice linear feel to it. The gear ratios seem very well suited to this 1.4-liter turbocharged engine as well. We've averaged a very respectable 28 miles per gallon over a week and 580 miles of aggressive driving in this Fiat 500L, and that's thanks to this dual clutch transmission as well as that 1.4-liter multi-air turbo under the hood. When it comes to fuel economy, one thing to keep in mind with the 500L is that increasing your speed really has a huge impact on your fuel economy. Just going from 70 to 75 miles per hour in this 500L dropped our fuel economy from about 33 miles per gallon or so average out on the highway, that's a flat level highway with the cruise control set, to around 25 or 26 miles per gallon. And that's thanks to this dual clutch transmission's gearing. Sixth gear is not terribly high, and at 72 miles an hour this engine is spinning about 2,500 RPM, which is fairly quick. Dropping a seventh gear into this transmission, as has been long rumored, haven't really seen one yet, but Fiat supposedly may offer one at some point, would probably help that, and I would welcome that change. By viewer request, we're now including a sound level measurement in our video reviews. The 500L scored 70 decibels at 50 miles an hour in sixth gear with cruise control set on an asphalt road surface. It is a little bit louder than the Buick Encore, but Buick spends an awful lot of time getting sound insulation right in their products. Now, the Encore is also a lot quieter when it comes to engine noise. The Fiat 500L has a decent amount of engine noise coming from under the hood when you're hard accelerating. Out on the highway, it's not so much of a problem, however. Pricing for the 2014 Fiat 500L ranges from $19,100 to $27,500, which makes it about $3,000 cheaper than a Mini Countryman. It's really difficult to say what exactly the 500L competes with, however, because there's nothing out there that's really quite like it. The Countryman has a four-wheel drive option, so it's more of a mini SUV than the Fiat 500L is. There's no all-wheel drive option on this 500, as I said before. It doesn't really compete with something like a Kia Soul or a Nissan Cube either, although the Nissan Cube is fairly similarly priced and that Kia Soul is just a little bit cheaper. The model we tested was the fully loaded $27,500 500L, and as such it represents a decent value. We got 28 miles per gallon over our about 500 miles in the 500L, which is fairly good for a vehicle of this size. The rear seats are fairly large, and overall the vehicle itself is a fairly large vehicle. You can jam an awful lot of cargo in the 500L, definitely more than you'd think by looking at it on the outside. Front seats are fairly comfortable, and with Chrysler's Uconnect system in the dashboard, it makes a decent gadget proposition as well. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that the Fiat 500L is just a little bit Euro funky. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just unusual for the American market. You'll find features and button positions and just the way things operate in the 500L is just that little bit outside the American norm. So other American cars out there, Japanese cars, Korean cars that are sold in the American market, they just operate just a little bit differently than the Fiat 500L. So if you're after something that looks different on the outside, behaves a little bit differently on the inside, then the 500L is probably a good buy. Not quite sure if I could get past the looks, but other than the looks for me, the 500L is definitely a car that I could see myself buying, if nothing else just because of that good value proposition and some of the little quirks on the inside. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been our quick look at the 2014 Fiat 500L. Be sure and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of our latest videos. Go ahead and comment on this video, tell us what you liked and what you didn't like about the Fiat 500L or just about this video in general. You can also send me a message right here on YouTube and request us to review certain vehicles if you're in the market shopping for one, and we'll see you next week.